Hey friends, in over 25 years as a Dungeon Master, I've had some games that sizzled and some games that really fizzled. And there's one thing that they kind of had in common, and that was how I answered one specific question. What's your opener? That's right, today we're talking about the recap, and in this video I will teach you the grab and invite method so that you can try to make every game as legendary as it appears in your imagining. Yeah, I knew you wanted to be a star. Today, there you go. Frankly, one of the biggest frustrations that people probably come across as Dungeon Masters is that their players are not thinking about their game as much as they are. And that's one reason why recaps are so important in our games. And one of those reasons why it should be the Dungeon Master that is providing them. It's great to see when you ask your players to do a recap what kind of information actually stuck with them, and that does allow us a certain view into their soul, as it were, to plan sessions ahead. But when we provide the recap, we're able to go so much further because not only do we know what has happened, but we know what's to come. And so in our recap, we know what it is that actually is going to make sense and be important for the characters to pull back from their memory during this particular session. If you've used methods other than the grab and invite to produce your recaps, or you are a proponent for players doing recaps, feel free to drop a comment below about it. I answer every comment and would love to talk to you about it. So here are the basic elements of the grab and invite method: goal, review, area, baseline tension, and invite. Sorry about baseline tension. Apparently there's no tension synonyms starting with B. Let's run through it. Almost at the very beginning of every recap, you should be talking about the overall goal that your party is currently attempting to achieve. Sometimes that might even mean talking about the overall goal and then the sub-goal that they're currently working upon. If you're running Storm King's Thunder, it should be mentioned on a very regular basis that you're attempting to stop the chaos in the wake of the breaking of the ordning. If you're running Curse of Strahd, the villain should be mentioned every time. And if you're running Tomb of Annihilation, the slowly withering people in response to the death curse should also feature in the beginning of every one of your recaps. This can seem like it's going to grow repetitive, and it is. If nothing else, you may need to find some ways to flare it up, but for your players, this reminder is absolutely vital. It helps to set the scene for what their characters should be thinking about even as they are dealing with more immediate goals. If they're not currently working on the primary goal, then it only needs that cursory mention, but then the immediate goal gets the next place up on the list. And either it's leading to our primary goal, making our players feel good about the direction that they're on, or it's a side quest onto another mission for another reward that allows our players to continuously judge whether or not they are doing the right thing by going on one mission over the other so that they're in their characters' heads appropriately. Right off the bat, using the G of the grab and invite method gets the players thinking about what they're trying to accomplish. I settle on review in order to keep this out of the Tony the Tiger area because really it covers review recent relevant revelations and challenges, and we didn't really want to be grabbing anything with the Tony the Tiger voice. It's grabbing great. Breaking it down, we are reviewing in order to try and put into the players' minds what should be in the characters' minds. Recent information, because what happened most recently should be top of mind in the characters' minds as well as in the players. Relevant, this actually trumps recency for the most part in that we want the information that we're putting into our recap to be information that may indeed be useful to decision making in the current situation, or in what we understand or believe our players are going to be able to get through this session. Deciding relevancy is probably the hardest part of using the grab and invite method. Figure out what it is that you think will be useful information and make sure that you give that up front so that you don't have to provide it later to jog their memories when their notes fail them. And finally, revelations and challenges. Essentially, the meat and potatoes of what it is that you might be revealing because it's recent and relevant. This is the point where you can decide whether something was relevant even if it happened to not be recent, or whether or not it is so recent that it's worth mentioning even though it wasn't relevant. Like, for instance, the random encounter with a group of spiders that happened right before the characters ended their session. A stands for area, and it's about setting the scene. I'm likely going to have to put an entire video together on this at some point, but to summarize and keep it brief, attempt to set the scene from what's furthest to what's closest, what's broadest to what's most specific, and what's least important to most important. Remember to use the 5 senses, but also remember the key rule that you can tell a player what their character feels, but you shouldn't tell a character how their character feels. It's okay to tell them of bone-chilling cold that makes their muscles shake, but not to talk about the spark of fear that is in their heart unless you're using a lot of equivocations. Finally, as part of the area portion of the grab and invite method, remember that if there is something that should be responded to immediately, it should be mentioned last. As soon as you mention something that requires a response, the likelihood of somebody actually listening to the rest of your recap drops very, very low. Finally, we have baseline tension because grat and invite just didn't have the same ring. This portion of the method happens throughout the entirety of your recap, and it is the setting of tension. If things are tense, you're building slowly from quiet to loud and from slow to fast, and building your way towards the invite. If it's relaxed, be relaxed. Your words, your tone, and the speed at which you deliver your recap will decide the starting tension of your game. No matter how good an orator you are, it won't set the tension at the level that you're desiring. Not unless you overshoot it by a huge mark. But what will happen is it will give you a jump start towards getting to that point. If you want things to be really tense, you have to deliver your message as if it was incredibly tense. And if you want things to be relatively chill, then you need to deliver in the most soothing, chill, laid back, all the time in the world kind of manner that you can muster. If reading a recap isn't really your thing, don't worry about it. Use some quick bullet points to give yourself some reminders about what you want to deliver in terms of information, and keep practicing. There's really never going to be an opportunity for us to say we have mastered this to the point where there's no room for improvement. That's one of the things that we love about Dungeons & Dragons. Finally, at the very end of the grab and invite method and the very end of your recap, your invitation to act. In order to master the first 5 minutes of your Dungeons & Dragons game, you're going to want to make sure that you start with an invitation for somebody to do something or a decision that must be made. A specific question that needs to be answered, a choice about what action that needs to be immediately taken, or the response to an NPC that is specifically already talking to them. This is essentially the same idea as starting a session with roll initiative and hoping that that will provide a tense beginning, but at an advanced point by having that already taken care of in the housekeeping of your game, and instead moving to Ardric, the dragon is charging towards you, what do you do? It makes a huge difference to the tone of your entire game and especially to the memories of your players. If you didn't leave off at a point where an invitation to act makes sense, then try to think of how you can move the action forward to the next point where action might make sense. Very rarely will characters complain about overcoming something that didn't involve them making a decision. Like, for instance, if they had just finished a fight with spiders, like mentioned earlier, maybe you move them forward to the castle that they were trying to approach. During housekeeping, before your recap, you tell them what kind of loot they found in the spider's lair, and you ask them to apply an appropriate rest to their sheets. You then begin with them approaching the creepy gates to the castle, which creak open to invite them to step inside. But, you say, there's also a shabby, broken wall beside that looks easy to climb if you want to choose an alternative method. how do you enter the castle grounds? By moving action forward to the point where you can provide an invitation, you immediately kick off your game with role-playing, which is, in essence, people making decisions. Everything else that we do is simply narration, and when we leave a non-specific invitation to act, our game starts out with waffling and decision-making, analysis paralysis, and slow movement, when instead we require the action of an individual or a decision that has consequence and seems to be immediate. We improve our player's ability to put aside all of that and instead just think, what would my character do? And move forward with that answer. I'd love to hear what you think about the grab and invite method, and if you've got a different method for laying out your recaps, then I'd be delighted to talk to you about that as well, so that we can all improve at our games of Dungeons and Dragons together. You done with this? Hey friends, in over 25 years, oh, nope, you're done. You're done with that, huh? Okay, all right. Yeah, you definitely got me off to a good start, didn't you? With the grab and invite method. Did you use the grab and invite method? Is that what your belly rub was? Mm-hmm. Yeah.